Hey gamer friends, I'm Danielle.
And I'm Josiah.
And we are ready to roll.
Today is going to be a little bit different video. We're going to do an interview style where she's going to ask me questions about being a first-time DM or dungeon master.
Yeah, so this is kind of like our RPG Saturday video. We would like to incorporate some RPG stuff in some videos here and there. And so we thought we would start with this one because it's lessons learned from first time DM. So let's just jump right in there.
Okay.
So what was the hardest thing about being a DM for the first time?
The hardest thing was knowing how much I needed to prepare. It requires a lot of reading and pre-session work to be a really effective DM. That was the hardest thing for me to come to grips with is, oh, I actually have to do homework. I actually have to do work to be ready for this.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. I love doing the prep work for it. I did get rewarded by watching my players as the game unfolded. And so it was definitely worth it, but that was the hardest thing.
Was it one of those things where it was like, I feel like I remember you like prepping a whole lot and then you're like, we did not get very far at all, or vice versa, like we used every bit of material that I had planned?
Yeah, it did go both ways, just depended on what them, because my philosophy as a DM was I'm going to create the world for them and then they're going to tell the story and I'm just going to assist them in telling the story. Sometimes that meant they would bite on my plot hooks and sometimes they went a completely different direction and I had to sort of improvise on the fly, and so.
Did you ever feel like they went to something that maybe you weren't ready for?
Oh yeah.
So
Tons
what did
of times.
you do?
A lot of improvisation. There were some times where I was like, hey guys, I don't have this prepped, so we may have to come back to this in the next session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was just honest with them about that.
Yeah. How did they react to that?
They were fine with it. Yeah, they were totally cool about it.
Okay.
But I tried really hard for that to not happen as much as I could.
Okay. So what was the easiest thing then about being a DM?
Oh, the easiest thing was watching my players role play. That was my favorite part.
Just because it's entertaining, or what?
Yeah, because I'm super invested in this story as the DM. When they would role play and have in-game conversations and make plans, it was just fun for me to sit back. I was like, eating popcorn, just kind of watching it happen and unfold. And yeah, that was absolutely the easiest part for me.
Did anything surprise you?
Yes, I definitely got surprised. So we played Curse of Strahd. And Curse of Strahd is D&D 5th edition.
Okay.
The 2014 version, because now 2024 is out.
Right.
But then we were playing the 2014 version of 5th edition. The combat aspect of 5th edition in 2014, the monsters are given a CR number that's supposed to match up with the level of your party to be a challenging fight. And the system was way off. I would throw a CR appropriate monster or monsters at my players and they would just mow them down.
Oh.
And so I had to learn how to adjust to match the CR versus where my players were so that it was a nice, good, challenging fight, but wasn't overly deadly or too easy. Right. And so that was a big surprise for me because it was supposed to be really easy. You just
like a plug and play kind of thing.
Yeah. Match the CR with your party's level and it's a good challenging fight, but that was not the case. Another big surprise was how much my players wanted to know about the story, the lore. It's called the lore. And so
like they were really into it.
They were really into it and wanted to know a bunch about it. And so this kind of goes back to the hardest thing, which was the prep, and that I needed to know a lot about the lore.
Right.
So that when they wanted that, I could give it to them. They caught me on my back foot a few times when I wasn't quite ready for it. So yeah, those are a couple of the biggest surprises.
Okay. What was the most fun part
Oh, this kind of overlaps with the other thing, kind of watching my players. I'll give another fun thing. Seeing my players react to the things that I was throwing at them was really fun. When I learned how to appropriately match monsters, dungeons or traps or puzzles or, whatever I threw at them, watching them react to that was really fun for me. Sometimes it would freak them out. And then, and then watching them scramble and try and, figure it out.
Okay, so how did you handle like adversity in the play?
At the table?
At the table.
It was tricky.
Like, were there ever any like arguments or things that like disagreements that were happening at okay.
Yep, we did have a couple of those. It was really tricky. I mean, ultimately, as the dungeon master, I had to say, hey, let's move on. This is how I'm calling it.
Kind of like a referee.
Kind of like a referee, yeah. And then afterward, talk to that player, and be like, hey, here's why I made that decision. I probably didn't handle it as well as I could have. But I tried to be as generous as I could in the moment. There was a couple of times where it kind of the game came to a halt.
Oh, okay.
Because of this disagreement. And so I eventually had to just say, hey, I'm the DM and I'm calling it this way.
Got it.
And we need to move on. So that's what I did.
I guess that's really any time that you're managing people, things like that are going to happen eventually. So yeah that's what I agree.
And there's no animosity between the people that we had disagreements about. And so I think we ended up altogether handling it pretty well. But yeah, it was definitely tricky, and another surprising thing that I didn't expect to have to deal with.
That's true. You don't really expect that going in because you're like, oh, we're having fun, we're playing a game. But I think people don't realize that because you're playing for such a long period of time with the same people, that things like that can sometimes happen.
Yeah.
Because this isn't like, oh, we had a couple of sessions. This was a 3-year campaign.
We spent 3 years on this campaign.
Yeah.
And also the players themselves are really invested into their character because they've spent so much time thinking about them and planning them and playing, role-playing them, that, it's like, it's kind of like a precious, almost a little bit. So I understand that. And then as a DM, I'm super invested in the story, but I'm more invested in the consistency of the story and the flow of the game, because I have to manage that, right? And so I can't have the game bogging down for 20 or 30 minutes and stopping, because then I lose the other players, right? And so it was tricky, but we worked through it.
That's good. Did you like watch any other DMs or like try and mimic them in any other way, or how did that go?
Yes. So there were a couple of DMs that were sort of inspirations for me. One, and they're not going to be a surprise to anybody who
would be watching this.
Yeah. One is Matt Mercer.
Yeah.
Of Critical Role. He's just amazing, unbelievable. And Brennan Lee Mulligan of Dimension 20. Those are two of maybe the most famous DMs in the world.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely no surprise, but they were absolutely my inspirations for wanting to DM in the first place.
Just like world building, and what parts of it did you try and like, oh, I want to take that? Yeah,
so for sure, Matt Mercer's world building is unmatched by anyone that I've ever seen. His investment in NPCs or non-playable characters. So the characters that sort of are around in the game that the players aren't playing. The DM plays all of those NPCs, and Matt Mercer's investment in his NPCs was very inspirational, and absolutely is the inspiration for several of my NPCs in Curse of Strahd. It was a big impact.
Yeah, because it kind of rounds out those characters. They're not quite so two-dimensional, and it makes it a little bit better.
Yeah, And then with Brendan Lee Mulligan, his storytelling is top notch. And so I wanted to try and emulate his ability to convey the story. And so, yeah, those are my two inspirations.
Okay. So if you were talking to somebody who was thinking about DMing for the first time, what would you tell them is the biggest barrier to doing it?
The biggest barrier is the prep work that you have to do.
Yeah.
If you're running a module, you need to have read the module maybe 2 or 3 times. Like, you got to digest it. And then I would say on top of that, bringing in supplemental material to round out the story, to make it more interesting. And that requires a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of mental reps and thinking about it and practicing. I would sit in my office and practice my voices.
Oh, okay.
For my
characters.
Yeah, for my characters. And so there was a couple times where we had where I did a dream sequence with a couple of my players, and I would write out the dream sequence and then, edit it and rewrite it and then practice the voices for, that. And so it requires a lot of work and a lot of investment. But if you like role-playing games, if you like D&D, it's worth it. It's worth it for me. I'd DM again in a heartbeat. Yeah. I'm playing right now as a player character because we finished up my campaign, but there will be a time when it comes back to me to run another campaign, and I'll jump on it in a heartbeat. I love DMing.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything that you would do differently?
Yes. So I kind of mentioned bringing in supplemental material. It took me a long time into my campaign before I started homebrewing. They call it homebrewing. The module, because the module it's good. It's a great framework. Yeah. To start with, definitely. But it feels a little bit two-dimensional. At least the Curse of Strahd, the one I ran, and that's one of the best modules out there. It's the most popular module in D&D 5e, but I felt like it needed more. And so I would have started introducing homebrew content or supplemental side content a lot sooner. And
how far in did you start doing that? Do you remember?
Probably about halfway through, about a year and a half in. Okay. And so,
were you just nervous about it? Like,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because as a new DM, I didn't know. There are so many things I didn't know.
Sure.
And so I was like, I got to stay on the rails, and that's not true. Yeah. As a first-time DM, be creative. Use your creativity. It will enhance the game a ton, and your players will love it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so biggest takeaway. What's the biggest lesson you learned?
The biggest lesson I learned is when I first started, because I was the DM who was like, okay, I got to stay on the rails. I was a pretty strict DM in the beginning. I regret that. I wouldn't let the game flow very well. I wouldn't let my players do certain things because it didn't line up with the rules, and things like that. And I really regret that. As the campaign went on, I loosened up as I learned more about DMing.
Sure.
And so,
and your players were really patient in that as well.
They were. But I did have one of my players come to me. He said, "It feels like it's you against us." That was a big wake-up call for me, because I didn't want that. I didn't want it to be like it's me as the DM against you as the players. I wanted us to be cooperatively telling a story, and I'm playing the enemies, sure, but I still wanted them to feel like I'm on their side with telling this story, sure. And so I really appreciated him coming to me and telling me that, and it really kind of woke me up to how I was as a DM. And so that is my biggest takeaway: is don't be afraid to loosen up and let everything sort of flow, and not be so rigid. I'm not really a rule of cool DM, which just means that if it's cool and it sounds fun, then it goes, then it flies. I'm not really one of those, but I had moved much more that way as our campaign went along, and I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, because it's about having fun together.
It's about having fun.
The experience. Yeah. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.
And tell us down below, if you were a first-time DM, what were your biggest takeaways from being a first-time DM? I would love to hear those stories. I love hearing stories about D&D or other role-playing games.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.